uniform citizen. However, I still feel pretty much in the dark about the details of county revenues and expenses. When I first started attending county meetings and began asking questions, I learned about budget and audit schedules. I questioned commissioners how they could prepare a budget in the fall for the coming new year where they had not completed their audit of the previous year. In talking with DOLA, I learned that citizens could formally protest the budget. I did that. DOLA also informed me that they were withholding tax revenues until the county produced the statutorily required audit. I acquired that letter via an ORR to the county. The information was published in local media, much to the disdain of commissioners, but the exposed malfeasance and embarrassment forced the county to start getting its financial house in order. Public outcry of overpaid and overextended contracts also forced needed change. I believe the county is up to the task to provide more meaningful financial reports to the taxpayers, which would benefit everyone. Better educated taxpayers make better partners with government. So to that end, I have put together a collection of links to other Colorado counties that are doing a better job of sharing information with their citizens. Specifically, I would like to see financial reports developed that give the citizens a clearer picture of all revenues, expenditures, and balances on a monthly and to-date basis to include most, if not all, departments. I think RFPs and contracts should be on the website. Also, developer-paid fee receipts should be available. Itemized credit card expenditures should be available. County-owned assets should be available on the website. Water rights, mineral rights, vehicles. A lot of governing statutes should be linked from the website or posted on the website, such as statutes governing the treasurer. Department and money transfers to the treasurer should be online. Quarterly departmental budget reports should be developed and posted. Again, I am providing copies of links to other counties' websites and pages where these types of reports are provided. Thanks.
And just for the record, it would appear that we are receiving a document with those sites links that were referenced. Great, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a comment, and that is, much of what you said is what we're working on. It's the three of us, when we were sworn in, recognized that there were some deficiencies in information, availability of information, even to us. You know, because the processes and procedures that were in place and still, to some extent, are in place, need to be updated, upgraded. I know we are evaluating right now our software to figure out how we can accomplish something. And I'm going to hurt myself, pat myself on the back, is that much of what you said predates us. And we recognize that there was some audit issues, but was that 2 weeks or 4 years ago?
And held our money for 5 years, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah. So we're busy working on trying to figure out how to use what information we have, our software, and things like that. Because I, as an experienced manager, managing lots of people and big budgets in the counties, recognize that there are some things that we need to do to get a good, what I call management tools. And I'm looking at that from a selfish point of view, not a community point of view, is that you can't manage without the information that you just talked about. So the frustrating thing to me on a personal basis is how long it takes to get things accomplished in this environment. And I'm going to defer to Sam here in that much of what you said is conversations that we almost have 3-4 times a week trying to figure out how to do what you just said. And I'd like to tell you that we'll have it completed by tomorrow. I'd be lying to you. It's going to take a little while for us to get it done, but we're working on it.
More public comment?
Marlene Groves again, 33300 Ridge Road.
I think that what is demonstrated with the declining of those numbers is that you have more information available and on the website, so that is good, and definitely worth recognizing. I also want to recognize that possibly some of the reasons for doing that, not just because of your own ideas and initiatives, is because of the citizens like Sushik and others who've asked for information. I'd also want to make sure or caution that those citizens aren't treated harshly for wanting to be involved. And then I heard the comment about it costing about $2,000 to go back and to do the core requests. I've never done a core request, for the record. So maybe when we look at the top 3 or 10 items that are being requested, those are what you put on the website next time, because it's going to save you that $2,000, and it's kind of like a no-brainer. So, you know, I appreciate the efforts for seeing more documents available, and I've heard people that also appreciate it, but, you know, there still is work to do, and let's not treat citizens poorly if they're involved in asking for information. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Keep it.
Rick Brown, 26493 Short Forest Trail, Kiowa. First, I think I'd like to thank Mr. Greer for recognizing that you know, the more you put on the website, the less need there will be for the administrative costs, whatever they are, of dealing with these requests. With respect to those costs, I'm not sure. And I'm sure the computations have been done in good faith, but I think what needs to be pointed out is that the people doing that work, in terms of responding to these, are being paid anyway. In other words, unless the time devoted to responding to these requests leads to overtime, or the overtime costs, or the postponement of work on other projects that leads to additional expenses, I'm not sure you can, it's fair to simply say, take the hourly rate of the people and say, this is what it's costing us. What you really need to look at is the actual out-of-pocket cost for the county. In other words, how much cash you're actually behind as a result of doing this. Another issue that this sort of implicates, though it wasn't addressed directly, is a suggestion that's been made in the past, and one that I've discussed recently with Commissioner Wilcox, that the names or the actual requests that are submitted be put online so everybody can see who is doing that. And you know, I had been assuming that these requests, the actual request documents, were matters of public record. But I took another look at the CORA, the Open Records Act, last night, and I think you need to be very cautious about assuming that these are open records. In other words, the kind of aggregation of data that Mr. Greer has done is perfectly appropriate under CORA. But CORA does place limitations on releasing email addresses. It does place limitations on releasing the names, addresses, and telephone numbers, in other words, personally identifiable information on people who are utilizing county facilities as people who submit requests are. We come into the office, we fill out the form, we come in again to review the documents. That kind of personally identifiable information regarding people who have utilized county facilities cannot be released. In that regard, I'd refer you to CRS 2472-204, subsection 3A, Roman numeral 9. I'd also refer you, with regard to email, the confidentiality of email addresses, to 2472-204, 2A, Roman numeral 7. Thank you.
I would say posting of open records requests would not be considered. Posting of our ORRs would not be considered. Okay. Just strictly as information and not request.
Yeah, and I mean, there's I don't think Bart was trying to indicate that there was some burdensome cost with responding to open records requests. It's a responsibility we have, but there is an opportunity cost. I mean, when we're pulling specific records, I think this might be one of the times when we're all in violent agreement that more information is better. I mean, it highlights the importance of putting what we can readily available online, so those taxpayer dollars that are paying salaries are devoted to more productive work than something that's kind of clerical and just passing paper back and forth. So it's not an additional cost to the county, but it's an opportunity cost in other items that those employees could be working on if we do get stuff online. So I don't know if, like I said, it seems like we're all in agreement that more is better. So,
yeah. This is a common practice. We always monitor our open records request from the department we have, because sometimes it indicated trends, it indicated things we could work on. So that was my interest. So that was why I requested the information. So. Yeah,
the only comment I have is basically what Chris just said, is that the $2,000 over a $27 or $28 million budget doesn't sound like very much. But I hadn't thought about it wording it as an opportunity cost, but that's exactly the right way to say it. Is that means our people aren't working on more important or important projects. I take out more on important projects. Because it is important to satisfy the requests of the citizens. Again, it's not much money, but it does take time away from other important projects.
Thank you. All right. Any more public comment on our open records? No. All right. On to industrial hemp. Interesting.
Kind of interesting topic. Okay, Commissioners, I'd like to brief you today on industrial hemp. The county currently does not have any policy, procedure, ordinances, or permits for industrial hemp, and the county has been receiving some phone calls and inquiries about the requirements to cultivate hemp in Elbert County, and we actually received a very informative brief from 221 Farms at Yellow Pine Ranch in January on the proposal of cultivating industrial hemp. Currently, there are 9 registered hemp grows in Elbert County, as posted public record on the Colorado Department of Agriculture hemp webpage program. Here is the agenda that I'll be briefing today. Please interrupt me anytime during this brief for any questions so I can address them right then and there. And if there's a question I can't answer, I'll write it down and make sure I get back with you and research there and get the facts.
I'll start with the interruptions, I guess. So 9 registered folks in the county, registered by the state, but the state does not inform us when they do that.
That is not a requirement with the Hemp Act, and I'll get to that very shortly. Now, just because they are registered and is posted at the Colorado Department of Agriculture website does not mean they have an active grow. No. Also, that address that is provided on that web page is not the actual location of the grow. Okay. What it is where the registration is at, so they can mail any reports or questions that to the grower or the registrant. Okay. What is industrial hemp? It's a very simple definition. It is the cannabis genus that has a TH level of 0.3% or lower. It is not a it is in the marijuana family, but with the THC level that low, it cannot induce any type of high, as to say. What they've been saying is it takes about 100 pounds of industrial hemp to smoke to get any type of high with the marijuana that's available right now. So it's basically not compatible unless you're going to have a real heavy backpack. In 2013, Amendment 64, approved by the Colorado voters, is what brought us here today. Article 61 of the Colorado Revised Statutes is what is quoted most often on the rules and regulations on the cultivation and processing of industrial hemp. 8 Code of Colorado Regulations outlines the registration process, the fees, the inspections, reports, penalties, the Colorado Department of Agriculture approved seed, and the waiver process in a case of a non-compliant crop. And the Senate Bill 13241 is what formed the hemp board in the CDA to regulate hemp cultivation.
Is there anything at the federal level prohibiting, encouraging? Is it silent?
It is right now silent, and I know Ms. Williams has some probably more information on that. But what the hemp board always advises is that the registrants and growers are cognizant of the federal laws and banking regulations with the dealings with cannabis. To register with the state to grow industrial hemp, the grower must do the following. There's a $500 application fee, plus $5 per acre for an outdoor grow, or 33 cents per 1,000 square feet for an indoor grow. They must provide their name and address, what type of business it is, legal description of the location, a GPS grid to the center of the registered land area, a map showing the grow area with all the 4 corners. They must also sign the waiver that all information provided will be publicly disclosed to law enforcement. They must fully cooperate with sampling procedures, pay for all inspection and lab costs with inspecting of the crop, and submit all reports due by the required date. The registrant must also have the legal right to cultivate on registered land. They are not allowed to use BLM or parks to farm hemp. That is one thing they are not allowed to do.
When you've been researching this, is the state forthcoming with this information they're supposed to provide?
No. Kind of should have prefaced right off the bat is in researching this, I've got very varied opinions on hemp and marijuana. If I go to the law enforcement side, they are very against just about everything. If I go to an association side, they are very against any type of regulation. So it's a wide gambit of who you talk to, what their agenda is, what they're promoting. And so I try to make this brief as factual as possible. There is some opinion here, but I'll disclose it if it is an opinion of a person or an agency. But I want to make this as factual as possible. And so, yes, forgot to disclose that right up front, Commissioner. But there are and very strong opinions talking with people. But in this research, I've talked to multiple sheriff's office. I've talked to 23 counties. I've talked to the CDA. I've talked to hemp associations, trying to get as much information as possible so this brief provides you with everything that you need. So continue on. The registrant must have no cannabis plants with more than 0.3 THC may be cultivated in the registered land area. So basically there's no co-use for marijuana cultivation on the RLA. The registration is also only good for 1 year. They must register every year after that and still pay all the same fees. And all hemp must be grown in that 1 year registration period. If it is not, it must either be destroyed or disclosed on the subsequent application to the state. Talking with the Colorado Department of Agriculture on their hemp program, I was told only that one county had any type of regulation or policy on industrial hemp, and he really didn't know which one. But as I started peeling back the onion, calling all these other counties, they do have policies, they do have ordinances, they do have fees. But they did offer up these 3 recommendations for any type of registrant coming into a county, that they do provide the registration of the county annually, that the registered grower contact the sheriff's office to let them know that they have the grow operation, so they know the location and the size. So in case there is a complaint, they can quickly, dismiss it of that is industrial hemp, it's not marijuana or illegal grow, just to educate the public. And the third one is just to make sure that the grower also contacts the fire department to tell them what is on the site. So in case of a fire, they know what type of hazmat's there, what type of structures, any chemicals, or flammable liquids, so they can deal with a fire appropriately and bring the proper equipment in case of that it does arise. The Colorado State rules for inspecting hemp is following. All registrants are subject to routine inspection. They'll be notified in advance of an inspection. If a suspected violation of the Hemp Act, they will be tested without notification during normal business hours. And all costs associated with testing is paid for by the registrant. There are two types of non-compliant hemp. Hemp with THC levels between 0.3% and 1%, and then also hemp above 1%. Any hemp that is between 0.3 and 1% the grower may face suspension or revocation of their license, a penalty up to $2,500, and the crop must be destroyed. If the hemp is above 1%, it is now considered an illegal grow operation, and information is turned over to local sheriff's office. I asked the CDA on their policy on the notification of the sheriff and the grower, and they do not have one at this time. So there is no timeline or policy of who they notify first. Destruction of non-compliant hemp, the CDA recommends three things. One, they either compost it. Two, it's called hempcrete, was make it into cinder blocks with a hemp fiber core. Or the grower may suggest an alternate method that must be approved by the CDA commissioner. Talking with some of the other counties, the other methods were fire, shredder, coating it in diesel and putting it into a landfill, or if you're in Pueblo, they put in the blast furnace. Now, fire has been discouraged by a few of the counties that have used this method due to concerns of the spreading to a wildfire and the odor associated with the burn. But these counties also have marijuana grows are allowed there, cultivation. So that's some of the other problems that they're having with.
I'd imagine CDHP wouldn't really care for people dumping diesel fuel soaked stuff into landfills. It's an odd one.
And that method is only approved or utilized with marijuana to make it non-usable. So even if somebody goes into the landfill to dig it back out, it's covered with diesel, you can't get rid of it.
So putting diesel in the ground, which is usually frowned on. Yeah. But, okay.
It's one of the methods of the, they
don't have a
use.
landfill, so it's not an issue, but it's weird.
Right now, there are 64 counties in Colorado. 50 of them have registered land areas for hemp grows. Weld County leads with 65 registrants, and I briefed earlier, Elbert's got 9. Here's just a visual of all the counties in green that have registered land areas. The highest concentration is along the I-25 corridor and to the north. Here's a roll-up of the 23 counties and what their policy and procedure is for the cultivation or processing of industrial hemp. The counties were chosen by the highest number of registered land areas or the proximity to Elbert County. 2 have a policy and or fee just to grow hemp. 5 just require notification or proof of registration with the state. 16 require a permit and fees for processing ranging from $0 up to over $5,000. 6 have no policy, permits, or fees to grow or process hemp. If you need to, I can go into those 23 counties with more detail. I've got those in backup slides.
I do have a question. Just noticed Lincoln County right next door does not. Have you talked to them? Do they actively discourage it, or?
Lincoln County, I tried to get a hold of. I never got a call back or an email. Some of the counties or sheriff's offices, when I try to call in, just you get a voicemail or the round robin on the phone tree. Okay. So I did try to find Lincoln, but
just
couldn't get anybody in there in a timely fashion.
Yeah, thank you.
Other thing that I looked into when I was directed was looking into other states. So I found 3 states, one with a legacy program, one that is in the initial pilot program, and another one's in a research only. Montana is in its pilot program, began last year. Growers can only use DEA-approved seed to ensure a 0.3% or less THC level, thus ensuring compliance, and they have no testing program. And you must declare the end use of the crop, and also they have a $450 fee. New York is in the very start of its program for research only, and do not have a good indication they know what they're doing when I talked with the rep at the Department of Agriculture there in New York. Just when I asked very pointed questions, they didn't know anything beyond that. I asked about destruction, asked about their siege, asked about their policy and procedure. So all they could really tell me is that the growers can use any seed. They've got no policy or program to make sure that they get the right seeds from out of state. If they're getting one that's above 0.3% THC. They've got, their testing is very vague, and destruction policy they haven't even thought of yet. But they must declare their end use of the crop. Crops are going to be tested within 2 weeks before harvest. It is random, but they plan to go to 100%, and they have a $500 fee. So they're still going and stumbling through this whole program. Probably by next year, they're going to be a lot better off.
I'm sorry. One of the calls that I had about this is I asked them if they had already purchased the seed, and they said no, they were going to use cuttings.
The cuttings, and that is called cloning. And what they do is they have a plant that is from approved seed, grow it, clone it with the cuttings inside of a greenhouse till it gets to a certain height, open up the greenhouse, get it acclimated, and then they'll transfer it out to the field to get planted. Thus, using the cuttings and the clonings, you ensure that you're at that lower level. Especially if you're using a plant from before that was already tested good, you maintain that compliance. In talking with the 221 farm and a couple of the other counties, that is the main thing of legitimate hemp growers. They want to maintain transparency and make sure that they are legitimate.
Your initial seeding since you're planting a seed, if there's a process, if you start this, isn't there a process for purchasing seed and transporting? Does that work?
That one I'd have to research a little bit more for you, Commissioner, or somebody else could answer that a little bit better during public comment. But I haven't researched that yet, but I can take a look into that.
Understood. I didn't know there was only certain areas you can purchase the seed or start this with.
I do know that they have a certain seed that you can purchase, and there are some rules governing it, but let me dig in a little bit deeper and get back with you. Now, the transportation, they do say you'll make sure that it is, when you're transporting hemp, it is within the local regulations and laws of that county you're transporting it through. But I will make sure I research that one a little bit more and get back to you. State of California has got a legacy program they've been growing for a little bit longer, but they also allow marijuana cultivation. They're a little bit more lax in their requirement. But they do make sure that the marijuana is not grown in the same field. This is why they do not allow any grows less than 1/10 of an acre. They also do not allow you tending to the plants or clippings. Must have signs around the farm showing as an industrial hemp and not marijuana, and have a kind of a destruction policy for non-compliant hemp. But if it's between 0.3 and 1%, it must be destroyed within 45 days of discovery, and if the hemp's above 1%, it must be destroyed within 48 hours. But one thing that California does not do is notify law enforcement of non-compliant hemp, no matter what the THC level is. I also datamined what other counties' planning commissions were requiring for cultivation and processing of hemp, and I picked Routt County. And if anybody doesn't know where that is, that's Steamboat Springs up north. They had many good examples posted on their county webpage. The next example was for a grow and processing operation at a former Bobcat dealership, and the board was concerned with the listed 16 items above. What they're doing is transforming that dealership from retail into light industrial use. And that's what I've seen across the board when they're processing hemp. The zoning's always been light industrial. After the board made their comments, it was opened up for public comment, and they had similar concerns. Hayden Hemp was able to address each of the concerns and also the concerns of the public. The site plan was approved 9-0. Part of the approval was that any of the concerns that were not addressed or came up later as an issue, the permit could be revoked. Hayden Hemp was ready and willing to address and keep everything running smoothly. That can be found on their webpage listed below, if anybody look up the board minutes on that. I also researched what 4 other Sheriff's Office policy, procedure, or general comments on the dealings with industrial hemp. And this is where I kind of got into, there are some very strong opinions, left or right, on hemp and marijuana. And sometimes the facts that are presented are not exactly what is true. In El Paso County, there's a major industrial hemp operation in the east, and they've had problems with thieves coming out there and stealing vast quantities of the industrial hemp, thinking that it's marijuana. So the Sheriff's Office has spent a lot of resources and time dealing with it. They do not like the hemp due to this issue. The farm is not taking any of the recommended precautions or measures from the Sheriff's Office in signs, fencing, security, and lighting. They said that the CDA takes between 3 to 4 months to get results back, and the CDA does not test, but the CDA does not test for any outside agency. So it's kind of a conflict with what they were telling me. But they did say that the CDA is hard to work with and reluctant to provide assistance. They've asked them to come down and just provide briefings to the Sheriff's Office and the public, and they have not done so at this time. Pueblo County has a very high marijuana operation and cultivation rate, so they're not really that concerned with industrial hemp. That's why when they won't test any industrial hemp unless it's beyond a reasonable doubt that it could be an illegal grow operation. But they also said the same thing that El Paso did, that the CDA is very backlogged in testing manpower and just reluctant to deal with anybody. La Plata County has 2 grow operations, and they said they've had no issues with the farmers, and the farmers are very open, always compliant, and very transparent. And they provide the feedback that they don't want to jeopardize what they've got going on. Thus, they are very cooperative and open with the Sheriff's Office. Larimer County has had issues with the illegal marijuana growers posing as hemp growers due to the closeness of the border and exporting the marijuana to other states. They do have 39 legitimate hemp growers right now, and they've had no issue with them and are developing very quickly how to tell the difference between a marijuana illegal grower and a hemp grower. They're coming up just with some SOPs of what sheriffs should look for when they go out to investigate. They say there's some very key telltale signs. The reason that Larimer County's got a bunch of issues is just that closeness with the border and also allowing marijuana cultivation up there. And so a lot of illegal grows. But Sheriff's Office got no issues with the legitimate ones. As for testing, because that came up a couple times, it takes a while for the CDA to come back. There are multiple labs in Denver that provide testing. It's only $45 and 3 business days or less to get the results back. So right now I was counting 5 right in the Denver metro area that can do this type of testing.
When you were talking with the other counties, you've got 3 to 4 months to get test results, testing 33%, et cetera. Have they experienced cases where something's been harvested, moved on, and then they find out later?
We never got into that part, okay. And you know, it seemed they had a little beef with the CDA, and that's where there's just a strong opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
But when you look at how many registered land areas you have in the state, and you have a very small department, manpower is an issue, and so.
Or excessive licensing is an issue based on their resources. Yeah, but
so, you know, it's as everything. It's only a couple of years old. Yeah. Everything's developing. And it just gets better with time and more feedback that's provided. But CDA doesn't do any testing, so I don't know where the Sheriff's Office were getting that. Okay. And as soon as I found out there's the labs that do that, it's like, that's too easy, especially in proximity, how close Elbert is to there, 3 business days, and a very low cost. Right now, the CDA center is about 33% to test before harvest of what they can get to. But with the other counties, they're saying that's not even happening. It's a little bit lower. There is a requirement for testing, but they can't get to everybody. And then they can't send the samples in. Somebody has to come out to take them.
I know we're probably getting ahead of where we could go, but we could require that testing, I'd assume.
Right? Cultivation cycles. One cycle per row. Is it
one season a year?
one
or-
season?
That one I'd have to research. But I think it's only one.
Okay. For the,
One.
it sounds like timing. If you're going to require testing, timing is kind of critical. As to,
Especially if you've got a couple hundred grows across the state and you've got 5 people.
right. That's
It's a manpower issue.
Yeah.
And I can see why they're reluctant to provide assistance, because they are just stretched probably so thin. All right. Here are the shared concerns that with the planning commissions, review boards, sheriffs that I pulled out. Light pollution. Everybody's like, why light pollution? They're trying to keep all the grow houses away from residential units because they do have lights that go 24 hours sometimes, and so it'd be a light pollution concern. The odors from some of the grows, if they don't have filters installed on their greenhouses, that is sometimes a bother to neighbors. Water usage, which is also a concern across, Colorado. Traffic was also, they're looking at the dust, how much traffic was going in if they had to bring in dirt for the greenhouses or the plots of land. And some of the counties were requiring that the registrant also have a mediation plan for dust by requiring magnesium chloride a couple times a year to keep it down. But that was on a heavy use area or a retail. Processing and butane kind of go hand in hand. They're worried about the chemicals or flammable materials used to process hemp. Growing hemp, there is none except for your diesel for your tractors. Security was always an issue, and that ranged from active security guards, fencing, lighting, cameras. It just depends on where they are located in proximity to high avenues approach in and out of the farm. And then signs was a real big one, just to identify to the stupid people of the world that's an industrial hemp and not marijuana. Everybody kept saying it's very easy to identify between the two plants. Your common layperson is not going to be able to. So the signage around the facility or the farm will help enable and cut down some of the nuisances and crime from the people that don't know any difference.
Silly question, I guess, is I noticed one of your slides, 3 or 4 back, where you had one of the counties destroying the hemp that had to be destroyed and burning it in the gravel pit, and they quit doing that because of odor. And then here, your number 2 concern is odor. Does this have an odor when it's growing?
Yes, it does. And I know.
Is it, I don't know anything about it.
Neither do I. I'm going to probably be learning some more here shortly, but everybody was concerned, especially with the greenhouse operations, that filters were installed on the exhaust fans.
Does it smell like roses, or does it smell like manure?
Don't know.
manure smells better.
But it was mostly just on the greenhouses that everybody was concerned. The burns were within the La Plata County that did it in the gravel pit, but they were also burning the marijuana. And so that's where, and so they kind of roped in industrial hemp with the marijuana if they had a non-compliant to burns, because that was their current policy, but they're changing it due to wildfire risk and just the odor. And so they highly don't recommend it. The only person that really can burn it with no issue is Pueblo, because they got blast furnaces. After talking with department heads, here is the proposed hemp grow permit to cultivate hemp at this time. This is to cultivate, not process the hemp. That we require proof of registration with the state annually. It's registered in a land area to grow zoned agriculture, water rights for the farm, proper fencing and signage, destruction plan in case of non-compliant or registration expires, One that we did add yesterday after we had a meeting with department heads that are not listed here that I'm going to add to the briefing a little bit later is a bond for destruction in case of bankruptcy or other reason grower cannot destroy. Will allow access to the site by the sheriff's office to inspect for compliance. We also added this one yesterday, that all costs associated with testing is paid by the grower. This is in accordance with the same thing the CDA does. CDA, when they have to go out to test, they charge a per diem, mileage, employees' fees, and the testing fees. So no cost to the Colorado state government for testing any of the industrial hemp. And then we also propose a $250 fee. So from this list, we only added two things: all costs associated and a bond for destruction of the hemp in case of bankruptcy or other reason the grower cannot destroy it. And here is the timeline that we propose for the implementation of this permit. Right now, we're at the March 2018 phase, where we're having the permitting meeting. In April, we're going to meet with the Sheriff's Office, the Fire District, Road and Bridge, and other stakeholders to make sure that the permit meets the left and right limits, and we capture all the costs associated with the implementation of this permit. Then we'll draft the permit. We'll go for the BOC approval, and then permits will be available 2018 in October, and they'll be implemented on 1 January 2019. At this time, do you have any questions or guidance?
That permit, would it be a continuing permit or would it be a year at a time?
This would be yearly and tied with the CDA. That way, if with the permit, we have to make sure we're checking that they have their registration up to date with the state.
Yeah, I would, you know, the timeline, some of the questions we've asked, obviously we still need, there's some answering, but I think at least to start, we would want to look at something kind of like an alcohol permitting process where we actually do take public comment. I mean, I think this is something new. People are going to be interested. It's more than a consent agenda approval.
This was the initial,
definitely.
yes, this was the initial information brief. Get the questions and guidance from the commissioners, get the public feedback, conduct additional research and fact-finding, and just keep coming back with more and more, and keep putting it up on the webpage so everybody can see it.
One of the things that you get, this is from phone calls from people that called in, the economics of this thing, with respect to agriculture, are stunningly.
And it's varied. With the research I've been doing, it depends on what web page or association you're going to. I've seen between, for just the hemp fiber, $75 a ton for the hemp fiber, to $21 a pound for the hemp seed, and you can get about 600 pounds per acre for hemp seed, and I think about 3 tons per acre for hemp fiber. So you're looking at, if you're just doing a hemp fiber, about $200 an acre, to, if you're getting $21 a pound, over 12,000 for hemp seed. So it can be very lucrative. Just depends on what you are farming it for. But I have not found a definitive site that's saying this is the going rate for any type of industrial hemp product. Marijuana is kind of openly traded, has been ranging between, I think, $900 to $1,200 a pound. But industrial hemp doesn't have that type of visibility for each one of the individual products. So it's very hard to data mine. The only hard data that I found was a report from 1994 on how much the cost analysis is on the production of industrial hemp to the out product, and if the loss or gross of proceeds. But that's too dated to give any type of analysis.
Yeah. When did this start? Actually, production start in the state, or did the state start permitting?
That one I think is a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So it's still gaining traction.
Yeah.
They're still working out the friction points, just with everything.
Yeah. I'd imagine as production goes up, yield, what you receive for, the prices will go down with supply going up.
Supply and demand.
But conceptually, I think the process you're working is good and much appreciated. Yeah, I would say, I mean, it's an accepted agricultural product. I think just as we're working through this, and this isn't meant to be negative, but we don't have wheat grows, we don't have corn grows. It's a crop. I mean, I think even just referring to it as a grow kind of gives a connotation that this is a negative thing. I'm not sure where it is right now, other than it's a potential agricultural product that, from what I gather, is fairly efficient in water use and yields a good benefit to those that are producing it. So,
if I can remember correctly, the proposed farm at Pine Ranch is going to be doing underground irrigation through piping. And they've got a pump on the site, and I believe it was at 67 gallons per minute, and they wouldn't even come close to that of what they'd be pumping through. So very water efficient, underground piped, so it's going to the individual plants. You're not flooding a field or using a pivot. You're wasting all that water.
I'm just kind of thinking the economics of it a little bit. At least in Elbert County, I'm assuming that they would be looking at wheat ground or something like that that already is farmable. And I think for a bill here, but I think wheat yields in Elbert County are somewhere in that low 20 bushel per acre, like 22, 23. Yeah, and so I'm in my mind, I'm doing the math, comparing commodity values. Wheat's what, right about $3, it's $3.25 right now. So that'd be $70 or $80 an acre. From what you described, if I understand it correctly, this hemp would be multiples of that.
And on the lowest end, $200 an acre for just the hemp fiber. That doesn't include the seed or any other products.
Yeah. So
Commissioners.
I think we're going to see pressure to do it.
Commissioners, there's a couple things. First of all, I want to thank Doug. He is now becoming very quickly the state expert. Other counties are now calling us to find out what we've heard as they move forward with their process. The other thing is, think of this as a hay crop. Any place you can grow hay, you can grow hemp. It's perfect for smaller acreages too, not just big wheat farms, or because you got to grow a lot of wheat at $3 a bushel to break even. So it fits in line with our right to farm and our farming heritage. And the other thing that I just want to make sure that you guys are very apparent of, if we do nothing, the grows will continue. We cannot say no to industrial hemp in this county. So we either permit it or we put our heads in the sand, in my opinion.
Well, one of the things I'd like you to state, if you would, I noticed Mr. Brown out here saying, now who is that man up there at the podium? Could you just describe what a veteran?
Okay. Everybody, I'm with the Veterans Local Government Management Fellowship. This is a program for transitioning veterans. They place you with local governments to gain the knowledge and job experience, and also help to build your resume, and also have weekly meetings with who your mentor is on getting a job in local government. So it's a great program for us that have served for a long time, and I want to continue to serve. All right.
Public comment.
Mike Buck, 26822 Richard Circle. I agree with Sam. We either permit it or stick our heads in the sand. But the only thing we didn't address here, I really appreciated the applicant paying for the inspections, the lab analysis, putting up the signage. I mean, it was a very well thought out, very thorough presentation. I think the only cost we didn't consider is the opportunity cost for our sheriff's office and our fire department. We talked a little bit about opportunity cost earlier. So when you're discussing this with the sheriff's department, keep that in mind as far as, hey, do we have to hire another part-time person? Are we going to not be able to respond as quickly to this side of the county because we're doing an inspection on this side of the county for a hemp grow? So that's my only thing that I would like to point out, is that opportunity cost that we spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I'm not sure if 250 is enough, looking at the yields that potentially come as well, so. Yeah.
Any other comments?
Bill Harris, 808 Caribou, Simla, Colorado. And okay, it's coming, and we need to be proactive on that. And one of the things that we're looking at as well is in the destruction of it is doing some chemical treatment with it, and we'll use it to feed our cattle rather than put diesel on it and bury it. That's not going to fly. You know that as well as I do. EPA is already on us. La Plata County does have problems down there. J. Paul Brown, the representative, is a friend of mine. We've talked to him concerning these issues as well. But yes, it is an ag product. It uses less water in the growing processes, and the equipment is more complex than what is used in growing any of your other ag products, such as alfalfa, wheat, what have you. So there's money to be made, both in equipment and the selling of the equipment, as well as the harvesting of this material. So there's 72 pages of places in Colorado that has presently put in applications to grow hemp. I mean, they're growing hemp down in Rocky Ford more than cantaloupe. They're doing it up in Olathe more than corn. They're doing it in Palisades more than the peaches. So it's all over. And yes, around the colleges, up in Weld County and Fort Collins, yeah, it's big up there. But yet, we need to control it, and that's where you gentlemen come in. And it's very, very critical. And if we can help you in any way, let us know. That's with the Colorado Farm Bureau. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Susan Schick, 4122 Down West Ride. I missed part of your public comment because I was out down the hall. But with regards to having enough policing to look into these things, it reminded me of something I learned through some of my other open records requests regarding the Sheriff's Department. So I thought it only fair to mention that the Sheriff's Department has, I think, 37, I may have these numbers off a little bit because I don't have my records in front of me, 37 employees in the Sheriff's Department, and he possesses 37 vehicles that would be ranked as, you know, policing vehicles, or sedans or SUVs. These aren't the Humvees and the tractor, you know, those snowmobiles, snowcats, all that stuff. So I think we have a lot of resource there to run around the county and look at things. We may need to hire some additional personnel. So I'm just saying we have resources that we aren't accounting for. I know you're looking for an asset manager to kind of get a handle on that. But I know, Danny, I spoke with you when you first came into office about my issues with all the vehicles that we have, and that we don't know where they are. We don't know who's running them around the county, and we're still a year and 3 months into your tenure, a year and a half actually, and we still don't know where those vehicles are and who's driving them. So I would say we probably have those resources available to us. We just probably need to put them to better use. Thanks.
I think that this again, I think your information on those vehicles is a bit dated. We now have a fleet manager that is, in fact, it's one of the things I was chuckling about earlier this week. We, much like you said, we had quite a few what I would call them antique cars. Older cars, lots of miles on them, that kind of thing. And he's been working very hard to getting our fleet tabulated, moderate, and all of those things. And I think Sam might want to address that issue, because you were the one that put that position in place.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll give you, yes, so we are taking a very strong look at assets, even old water tanks from 1949, pieces of equipment that we've pulled off of old vehicles that have been sitting around. We put it on government bids. I signed paperwork every week on clearing some of that older stuff out. So we are getting a much better handle on what the property, what the county owns as far as property and assets. With respect to the enforcement piece of this, again, we have to realize that the permit that we are talking about will be on the civil side of the county, and not so much as on the criminal side. We want to make sure the sheriff has free access, especially if he considers it a illegal grow operation or has any information to do that, or if he has to go in there and destroy it or supervise destruction as if it tests over 1%. Anything less than that is going to be more on the civil side, and we're looking at the compliance officer piece of that and how we do that. So that's just to make clear that we're not actually burdening the sheriff to do anything else on this. We're talking about doing this with in our current permitting structure, either out of buildings or CDS, probably out of CDS. Again, we'll get that figured out. But we are going to have stakeholder meetings with both the fire departments and the SO and Colorado Farm Bureau to kind of figure out what's best to do this. The other piece that I want to make very clear is that we looked at what the other counties were charging as permits, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of them are $100, $150 or so.
For growing, it is between nothing and about $150.
So we bumped that to $250. We will be the highest permit fee in the county.
But you again, address the comment there. On the vehicle side, you made enormous progress in we have
Yep.
We kind of centralized the processing of all the vehicles, the registering. We've done a lot of work on tracking our vehicles in our resources in the county, which I think to best update that, and I might ask for that on an update for possibly the next meeting.
That'd be great. Road and Bridge can do that because fleet manager goes under that. Finance might also come in and do a piece of that. We are looking, we not only provide vehicles for the SO, but also for Public Works, for our building inspectors, Health and Human Services. So all those vehicles are kind of wrapped now into asset management.
Yeah, but in regard to hemp as we move forward, no, that's okay. Do have some concerns. Just it seems like the only thing really coming out of state is permits. So kind of continuing to work that link. So as we put a process in place, it's public enough, and maybe ideally the state will at least be able to tell applicants that we have a permitting process and come talk to us, so we aren't going through the discovery process of somebody calling and saying my neighbor's growing pot and running out and finding that we have yet another state registered grow that didn't show up. And the 9 that are here, it'd be nice to know at least what the registered locations are and what their current status is.
So let me
what we will do is we will reach out to those addresses, and some of those addresses on the state website, are PO boxes. So when we have our stakeholder
it's a very small place to grow.
Yeah, it's very hard to grow industrial hemp in a post office box. We will notify those that we are going to be implementing the permit system in 2019. We will encourage them to come be part of the process in 18, but they will have official notice that as of 19, they will get permit applications they will have to fill out, and assuming that they have a permit in 2019. If the state does not give us the information we need, we have it on the public information side, and we will get the addresses and contact them ourselves.
All right, thanks.
Anyway, that's my thought process.
Another comment is I'm kind of listening to some comments here, and it sounds like we're being advised that we should go ahead. Well, it's our intent to get ahead of this and manage it appropriately. There has never been thought about trying to protect the county from raining down. That's not our mindset. Our mindset is trying to get ahead of it, be able to monitor it and manage it efficiency in this county. So that's all right. Yes, sure. Where's your oxygen?
Second?
Where's your oxygen?
I got a story about that.
Okay.
My doctor wrote Nancy a prescription for a ball bat. And he expects her to buy it. The biggest problem we find with the hemp is lack of knowledge of the people and lack of knowledge of individuals that jump the fences to go in there and think they can smoke it. And they don't really know what's going on. But even for the neighbor next door, lack of knowledge. So I think you're right on top of this. And it's, again, lack of knowledge. I find out, and I've heard more than one comment even today, how abusive our employees, our elected officials are to the people. I don't hear nothing about the people being abusive to you and to the employees. You drive a road grader out on 9 Mile Road, if you don't know where that's at, that's going into cinema. We give those guys a right of way, we wave to him. He's got a bigger vehicle than I got. But we need to realize that we need to cooperate and work together. And I think that's important in growing hemp. We need to work together and try to get all the information that you need to make an intelligent decision. And we're here to help. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, on to action items.
Righty.
Let's see, we've got approval of February 28 minutes.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would move that we dispense with the reading of the minutes and accept them as presented.
Do we have any discussion on this? All in favor?
Aye.
On to the approval of the fee policy. Approval of the meeting. Do we have to come up and speak to it, or our time is just?
Yeah, I think we can do if we have questions. Yeah.
I move that we approve the DOCC meeting policy.
Second. No.
Public discussion on the
Yeah.
meeting policy. Please.
Should I wait until you hear from staff on this? The agenda indicates there's going to be a staff presentation.
No, and we just, so we didn't need that.
I didn't, we weren't planning on the staff presentation. We
It's
did
just-
it last time and kind of taken a lot of folks' comments and stuff, so.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Rick Brown, 26493 Short Forest Trail, Kiowa. At your invitation, I had previously submitted extensive written comments on both this policy and the proposed open records policy, and subsequently at the end of February had a pretty lengthy meeting with Commissioner Wilcox about my comments. You've adopted some, most were not adopted, including alternative language I proposed. In the limited time available, I'll address what I see as the most salient issues that are still outstanding. And I'll refer you to my written comments for others. The first is that you already have a meeting policy adopted in January of 2017, and it's certainly fine to have a new policy, but my suggestion would be that it's prudent to expressly repeal any prior policies on this subject to avoid confusion. And that hasn't been done, and it's an easy matter to correct. There's two sections of the policy I'd like to focus on. The first is Section 4, which is labeled General Information, and states that meetings where decisions are made must be in public and properly noticed. Now, this is a correct but incomplete description of your obligations under the Open Meetings Law. Not only must meetings where decisions are made be held in public with legally required notice, but also discussions relating to the public business and those decisions, whether or not formal action is going to be taken, has to be take place in public and with legally required notice. And I know you're aware of this. It's in fact is reflected in your actual practice, and it's not clear to me why there's been such resistance to expressly stating this in the policy if you're already complying with the requirement. I'm not assuming you are complying. I'm not concerned about your conduct as much as the conduct of successors. We haven't had compliance with past commissioners, and also with providing the public with proper information as to what the obligations of the Board of County Commissioners are. So I think you need some modifications there, and I had suggested specific language in that regard. The other section I'd like to focus on is 5B1, relating to an exception to the public notice requirement in the Open Meetings Law regarding meetings that concern day-to-day oversight of property and employees. You incorporate this exception into the policy, which is appropriate. But as I pointed out previously, in the case of Elbert County, this is inconsistent with your own county manager policy. Am I done?
Yes.
Okay. Well, again, I would refer to my public comments. I think this policy is with respect to with respect to day-to-day oversight, is overbroad, and I would suggest that you again defer any action on these policies further until you correct this and some other deficiencies that I pointed out previously. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, thank you for your comments. Did take your values up into consideration. Any further comments on policy?
Yeah, I'd like to modify my motion. Instead of just state as part of the motion, this new policy replaces the old policy.
I accept that amendment.
Good. So we've got a new
Yeah.
motion.
Yeah, and I would just say, Mr. Brown,
Couldn't hear it, I'm sorry.
Grant just amended his motion to specifically state that previous versions were rescinded. I accepted that.
That takes care of that.
Yeah. And just in reference, there is no resistance to make changes or accept alternate language. Our intent in the policy isn't to repeat the entire statute regarding to this, but just to provide, as you said, as you indicated, that is a general statement, just talking about the general purpose of the policy. And then the exception for day-to-day supervision, though we have a county manager, and thankfully we have a county manager, we went for a long period without one. There was a long period of time where we as commissioners were holding day-to-day supervision meetings for our operations and employees because we didn't have a county manager. Though we have one, we still have two direct employees, that county manager and our attorney, that we do provide day-to-day supervision and operational management of. So I don't think it's inappropriate, and it's not meant to expand or lead down some slippery slope to secret meetings, and that's the purpose of it. And honestly, this isn't a back and forth. I just am responding to your comment, Rick, so.
All right, we've got a motion, a second, discussion. So, at this point, are we all in favor?
Aye.
Now you got to state whether we're doing it as a member. So, we've got a motion to approve the amendment
Motion.
All right, and we got a second.
Yep.
Okay, so, all in favor of that?
Aye.
All right.
Hey, Mr. Canadian.
So, all right, so we're at the open records policy. So at this time, I think, a motion to,
Yeah, I would move that we adopt the updated open records policy as presented.
with that, do we have any public discussion on
Susan Schick, 4122 Down West Ride, Elizabeth. I provided written feedback to Attorney Greer on February 20th. It seems that some of my comments were accepted and some were not. I have a marked up copy with some cosmetic changes that I think would improve the document, so I'll provide that at the end of my comments. I noticed in the new draft an expansion of a change in the original draft that requires a requester of records to supply a form of identification, whether requesting documents in person or via email. As I began considering that requirement, it seemed to me that such a requirement may not be appropriate or in line with state statutes. I have been trying to find an article I read where such a request was challenged, but I haven't found it yet, and I will continue to look for that. In the meantime, I reached out to Jeff Roberts, the Executive Director of the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, for clarification, and he wrote back to me, Susan, about 4 years ago, someone asked me about making CORA requests using a pseudonym, so I ran it by one of the attorneys. Here's how he responded. I have surveyed the CORA case law, and I found nothing in either the statute or judicial interpretations that would require the person making the CORA request to properly identify themselves. Nor is there any support for the premise that otherwise public records can be sequestered or not provided for public inspection solely because someone requested them anonymously or fictitiously. Put another way, if the records are public records in the first instance, they don't cease to be public simply because the requester is trying to maintain anonymity. Notably, other states, like Pennsylvania with its similar right-to-know law, expressly authorize anonymous open records requests. As an aside, Jeff writes, for criminal justice records, you do have to attest that you're not using them for solicitation or business for pecuniary gain. So, like I said, I will continue to look for the documentation that I believe I read that talked about whether or not a person needed to provide identification. So these topics are a little bit off, but it still begs the question why you would require anyone to produce identification to submit or to collect records. My recommendation would be to eliminate that requirement from the proposed policy. It also seems problematic from a security standpoint to ask a citizen to put their identification documents, such as a driver's license, on the internet when requesting documents via email. Why are you concerned?
No, I'm just asking because I don't understand your comment.
I don't understand the requirement to seek someone's identification when they submit. I mean, when we fill out the form, we put our name and we put our phone number. But if someone were to walk in here and provide you with a phony name and phone number, you wouldn't know the difference.
No.
And there is no requirement. It is an open record. I could go down to El Paso County and not produce any identification and walk in and get a record that was readily available just by asking for it. And I read their policy on that.
Okay.
And as the case is now, we can add. Okay. So, anyway, my comment. Thanks.
I don't think that is a smart question. I'm just trying to make sure I understand the level of.
Well, the statute allows, one thing is the statute does allow for a person who feels that they might be under some sort of danger to have all of their personal identification hidden. Okay, so they could put in a request. I don't understand the county's requirement to ask for that. I mean, if I put in an open records request today, as I have done, and I fall ill and I want my husband to come down and, you know, get him out of the hair of staff because they're holding those for me, I send him down and I send a little note to the staff and say, by the way, I can't pick it up and my husband's coming to get it. And that's okay. You know, everybody is okay with that. I just think that this is, you're on a slippery slope here, kind of in violation of the statute by requiring people to do that. And I certainly am not going to put my driver's license on the internet now to get.
I don't think we're asking anybody to put their driver's license on the internet. So what I can tell the commissioners is we are requesting identification for purposes of open records requests. We're not asking anybody to post their information on the internet. It's simply, if you come in here, it's something that's verified by somebody at the front desk, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's actually fairly common practice throughout the state for open records. Now, one of the reasons why it may also be helpful to have that is there's all kinds of information that may need to be redacted depending on who the requester is. If the requester is the individual who is the owner of that information, that may not need to be redacted. One other reason that we've included other criteria as far as identification, like phone number or email address, that sort of thing, is if there is clarification that needs to be included, is to follow up with that individual to try and clarify those things. And that's also, again, pretty common standard practice throughout the state.
Yeah, I would just note that as it was written, we did say an electronic request must include a copy of a valid identification. So.
I think that's a little different.
Okay.
Sending that information to the county than posting it on the internet. I would say there's a difference there.
Okay. And I would further say that in the discussion of this, we're trying to make requesting records easier by opening up a process for an email request. Right now, I believe we only by policy accept walk-ins or hard copy letters. Now, when you open up things to electronic requests, you open up the staff to potential response from floods of emails from Russia or anything else. So I think this was, actually, I know this was inserted to ensure we weren't just getting people to abuse the system. There's slippery slopes in both directions. I think this balances that well.
My comment stands, though. I believe this is in violation of statute, and I think you're on a slippery slope by putting this in the policy as it reads. Include a scanned copy of a valid form of identification to authenticate the identification of the individual making the request, and that it does not jibe with state statute. Thanks.
You comfortable with it?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you for your comment. Do you have any further comments on it?
I think by now you know my address. With respect to the open records policy, first, I would like to respond to Mr. Greer's comment about the need to have identification where certain information has been redacted. That's a narrow class of records requests, and you could tailor the policy to accommodate it without otherwise violating the CORA. I think Ms. Schick's point is that what you have now is simply overbroad. Turning to some of my other comments, here again you have a pre-existing policy, and again there's nothing wrong with having a new one, but we've already discussed the advisability of repealing the old one. The points I'd like to touch on above and beyond my written comments are a couple of sections. The first is 5C, dealing with physical review of records. Your policy fails to recognize that CORA allows citizens the right to require that records be transmitted by mail, fax, or email. And I believe I submitted alternative language that would accommodate that. Now I know that I heard Commissioner Richardson's comment that, well, we're not intending to reflect all aspects of our legal requirements in this policy. But this policy purports to be the county's policy as to what it is going to do in response to in response to records requests, as well as in the context of meetings. And if you're going to take the step of adopting a policy, it strikes me as a little bit sloppy not to accurately reflect all the legal requirements. And it opens yourself up to misunderstandings or to inadvertent violations of law in the future, because where people are going to look is not to the state statute, they're going to look to your policy to determine how to proceed. When you have an incomplete policy, you're asking for trouble. The other aspect I'd like to speak to is the requirement for everyone to submit a records request form all the time. This ignores the fact that readily available documents need to be made available immediately without a waiting period. I mean, if I go down to look at a title document, I don't have to submit a written request. If I want in the recorder's office, if I go to CDS to ask for a file that's not being used, that's not off-site for some reason, I should be able to see it immediately without having to wait 3 working days. And in fact, in past years, that has been the practice. And I think this is important when there's contentious land use issues and someone comes, or even non-contentious matters, if somebody goes in and wants to see a file concerning a quasi-judicial matter. You know, if I go to the courthouse, I don't have to wait 3 working days to look at a file if it's available in the clerk's office. Thank you.
Well, I would offer to amend my motion to also rescind any previous policies or procedures published on this subject. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, and just one point in the requesting documentation or requesting a request for any information. Again, we're trying to balance a lot of things in this county. One is very limited staffing. What's most readily available is what is on the internet. If we capture the requests for all information coming in, it allows us to capture what people are asking for in its entirety, which furthers our desire to get everything that's asked for readily available on the website. But there are times when something might be readily available in terms of what the public's belief is, but there is something else that's much more critical going on. And, you know, being asked to wait for a few minutes, being asked to fill out a request so we can capture what was being requested while that person goes and pulls the file, I think is entirely reasonable. So.
Without identification, bad things happen. I'm personally exposed to that, where I had a very large sum of money embezzled from one of my bank accounts. Because people said they got an email with my name on it, they'd known me 20 years, they just did it without having some kind of verification process. It turned out all right, they made it good, but the whole point is that particularly with respect to electronic stuff, is the negative things that are happening out there are significant.
Okay, so we got a motion,
You have an amended motion.
an amended motion? And we got a second on an amended motion?
Yes,
So we all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 2 action items. Next, board appointment. Sam? Yeah.
As fun as today was, 2 weeks is going to be even more.
Cool.
We have a lot of things on tap for March 28th meeting. CDS update, both the NZ and XX zoning, subdivision and zoning regulations update. We have an update on county-owned properties, the Sun Country bonding update, strategic plan update, update on archiving policy, volunteer appointments process. You all have committed to attend a Town of Elizabeth Board of Trustees meeting up March 27th. We have a couple of pending hearings coming up. There's special event permit.
Before we leave that meeting with trustees, does that have to be noticed?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes. No, it will be. The pending hearings for special event permits for Cowboy Up and Elizabeth Rodeo Association. Their posters are currently being posted, so they'll be ready for that. We have several land use items, a Prairie Ridge rezone and minor residential development, Sage Circle right-of-way vacation, Bayou Hills Meteorological Tower special use permit for 3 different items, Hurtnecki, Mitchell, and Cedar Ridge, the Elbert County Zoning Regulations Amendment, New Part 2, Section 27, the Economic Development Overlay District, and Elbert County Zoning Regulation Amendments pertaining to compliance revisions to Part 1, Section 6 and 7, rezoning procedures and requirements. And already today we have put in a request for update on vehicles from the fleet manager. And Board of Health.
And I think we'll next time start that meeting at the Board of Health meeting initially. And then we'll go into.
Just as a curiosity question, we've got 5 or 6 land use items next week. Early on in January, February last year, we basically had the land use meetings only start at 1 o'clock. Do we have a practice or a policy of holding a meeting at some time, like they do for the planning commission?
There's no provision that we have to. That would be at your discretion, whether you wanted to continue until whenever or continue till the next day.
That's, I think, what we do is if we start at 1, we'll continue, we'll get to as many as we can, and if we run into the time, we need kind of time for that.
Yeah, but more importantly, I want to make sure that the public
understands, and then what we'll do is continue it, call and continue it for the next day or.
My strong suspicion would be that we will not get through all of those within one session. So we may, as a county, want to take a look at a feasible date for continuation.
Okay.
It wouldn't necessarily be that. It'd be a continuous to a date and time certain.
And again, I'm not trying to put it in policy. I just want to make sure the public is aware of what we might do. Yeah.
All right. No? So,
I move to adjourn.
thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, folks.
We need to know who's in our building. We need to know who's in our building. We know him.